did not have the kind of equipment that we have now. Like, we can read things in parts per billion in real time. It's amazing. So I think the value is so, so, so important in whatever kind of struggles a community's going through. And it could be, I mean, even in terms of what they can do with water now. We're doing air, but like, they can DNA water back to, you know, with the waste. It's unbelievable. So I think the one thing that I would say is I wish that, like, it takes time to gather the data, right? And to get the results and all that. And I think, like, the communities, they are always asking, right? Because they want to know. The people, you know, they've been asking these questions for some over a decade. So I wish it was like a little quicker when we get the results back, but they have, you know, it has to go through a process. It has to. But it's just, I've seen what they've done in North Carolina with some of the same kind of studies that we're doing here. Obviously, North Carolina, they have poultry, but they also have a lot of swine, so it could be a little different. But what they're able to do is just like incredible. It came out at yesterday's session that we did. They can get DNA from the swine waste in people's houses. Like, think about that for a second. How undignified and inhumane is that? But the community, they all know this. We've been living with this for years. So I will start there because we could just go on. But thank you.
So maybe I'll ask a question to get into some of the spaces that maybe you also might be wondering about. Because often you would like to be able to have a breakthrough if you're sitting from a community perspective to know, is there a measurement that's a DNA this or a part per billion that for the contaminant that my community is facing? So could you speak about some of the challenges that you face in finding, like getting, you know, establishing trust, getting the working relationship going, figuring out what will work and what doesn't work? And would you ever be willing to say no to you, even if you're offered something of a, you know, technical support, like that power dynamic maybe in terms of challenges?
Yeah, and I can start. I think with the Trump Center, we were able, I think, hitting on some of what Maria already started, thinking about what are the questions that community have and then fitting the science into that rather than fitting community into your science. That's not how it works, because then that data is useless. It is useless data that's just being collected, and it is actually harmful. And so I think one of the things that I think the Trump Center had done really well was not only did they come to the community to be able to offer that support, but they showed up in other areas of communities, right? And so they came to those meetings. They follow it. They follow what's happening in communities, and then they understand why these certain questions are being answered. And so I think it's not about just showing up as a scientist, whatever you want to call yourself. You have to show up in many hats. You have to show up with compassion. The science is to validate the testimonies. The testimonies is not to validate the science. And so it is really, that's the issue that I feel like happens a lot. And to those type of partnerships, you do say no. You say no because then your voices are being exploited. And your story is being exploited. And somebody told me before, they say, if you don't tell your story, somebody else will. And those different tales of that same story creates impacts. They create outcomes. And so if you want the outcome you need, then you have to put the questions forward that needs to be answered. And so one of the things in communities that we are dealing with in Curtis Bay is the CSX terminal that had an explosion in 2021. And we were fighting hard. We were testimony after testimony, hearing after hearing. And then they was like, you need the data because CSX is saying it's not their stuff. Like, you need that. And so we then had to say, how do we collect this data? And you got to remember, we're just residents, and it was also just students. Like, they didn't probably even know where to start. Only thing they knew was their story. They was like, look, this is the story I got. Now, how do we move this story to data? They were able to then show that that was coal, that it was coal that was in people's homes, that it was coal that was going out very far from the terminal, right? And there was coal at their school, where they went to school. And so I think that because of that partnership, that teaches the students what type of partnerships they should be looking for, genuine collaborations that's answering the questions they need answered. I think also through these partnerships that a lot of times community organizations don't have money, right? They don't have that money to just show up sometimes. So there has to be a process of funding some of these actions that the community is doing, and also funding their participation in these actions so they can actually show up. Because you're also dealing with low-income communities where they're choosing between jobs, they're choosing between paying their mortgage and rent and things like that. So you have to be able to do that. And also, I'll make this last point, is understanding that a lot of the funding that these organizations are getting to do research is money that directly belongs to these communities. It is their money. Your research is not our business unless it's addressing the concerns that residents already have. And so that money that you may be collecting, maybe because you are a big organization or part of a big organization that has a budget to do that, or that can apply for those federal grants that's coming out. Those federal grants are only out because our communities exist and because of all of the pressure that communities have put. So really giving that money back to communities, and then also allowing the communities to lead the science.
I would say there's a number of challenges you face in the partnerships, and overcoming some of those challenges has been something that we've been able to do. Many of them stem from the bureaucracy of an academic institution. Things just move a little bit slower, and that can be a shock for some community members, particularly those that are deciding between their mortgage payments or paying off their credit cards that they've racked up debt on by doing some of this work on their own dime. As they're waiting for things to come through, right? So that can be a challenge, but we've found ways to address that. I think one of the most important things is just making sure that the partnership has everyone's best interest at hand, particularly that of the community. We've been lucky enough in our partnerships to really have truly caring partners that are looking out for our interests. The conversation starts at what needs does your community have? What questions is your community trying to answer? That is the agenda. The agenda is not one that was built before they came to the table, right? And I think that's so important, and that's what feeds a trusting relationship. Some of the other challenges, not as related to the academic, the partnership, but just doing the work. One of them is what we face in terms of when we're getting these measurements. How do we use these to effectively advocate, right? Particularly if the measurements are for a particular pollutant that you're looking at, or maybe what you're seeing in the community that's around on a regular basis for residents may be much lower than what you would see on, say, OSHA guidelines for how much someone can be exposed to something. Those guidelines came out a long time ago. They, maybe lack looking at somebody who's living in a constant exposure to something at low levels. So that's another challenge. And then you have competing interests in the community, right? You have these community advocates, but you also have industry. So it can, I don't want to say dangerous, but you're messing with an industry, and that can get ugly sometimes. When we were coming out with some of our preliminary findings on the data and it was being presented to the community, did have a lot of industry members in the room. And the days after that presentation, our monitors were down, knocked down to the ground, pushed over, damaged, because they don't want the truth about some of the reality of what's going on the ground coming out, and that's it's been something we've been working to overcome as well.
And just to be clear, no one saw anyone do it, but the timing was just kind of unique. One thing I want to say, and it's so important, the most important thing in these relationships is trust. And I will tell you what, Dr. Heaney you heard me mention Dr. Steve Wing. Dr. Steve Wing was the one that started doing the really community research on a heavy level. Both Dr. Heaney and Dr. Wilson trained that under Dr. Wing. That was their mentor. So, like anything, I know where their heart is. I know where their dedication is. Chris will never, ever, ever put any of us in a position where it's not okay with the community. And I 100% know that in my heart. I don't think, like, if anything was even proposed to you, you wouldn't even bring it to us. There would be a problem. And that's a big compliment. It's not, but it's true. You have to trust. If you don't trust, you're not letting them in the door because, like you said, it'll be, extracted. You don't want to be exploited. We want to fill in the gaps, and that is, I think, all our team. It's a great team, great people that are working on the projects, and like it just couldn't be better. Maddie, it's a good relationship, and it's solid, and it's trust behind it, and that's key.
And we've seen that play out in real time for sure with our partners here. Like we had sat on meetings with somebody who was trying to obtain some information with us for over a year. Him regularly setting this up, reaching out to us constantly, reaching into our contacts, our resources. Didn't have anything to help us. Just kind of wanted to take. And we are trying to move efforts forward. We bring our connections onto these calls. Chris sat in on one of those calls, and after this guy had met with us for so long, had never offered us anything. When the moment that Chris got on the call, tried to offer him some kind of consulting gig with based on some of the data that we worked on together. And we didn't think that was very kosher of the gentleman that we had given our resources to for a year and a half plus. And Chris called us and talked with us, and that wasn't something that he was comfortable moving forward unless we were. And I don't know that a lot of people would do that, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Turn down a financial opportunity.
Can I say that? Yeah, and I definitely agree with that, Michael. I think that you have to be willing to really truly put that community first, right? And what's best for that community. And I think also just transparency when you're in these spaces. What are you here for? What are you here to do? Is it just for this science? Is it to also help the community with the end outcomes of now we're going to use this to advocate? Are you here for a long time, or are you here just for a small time, right? It's just some of those things has to be transparent, because one thing community do not like is to be dragged along. And then as soon as you get what you want, everything is done. That's not okay. Community also needs to own the data. So the data that's being produced, it belongs to that community because it is that community's data. And then at the end of the day, they also have to then use that data, because what they get out of it, let me say something, what the scientists might get out of it is I did this amazing thing, which they did. They helped us. But what we get out of it is using it to then advocate, right, for what it is we need next. So there is a process. And in that process, for us to advocate with that data, we have to be able to also own that data to speak to that we were there. We know what it was. We know how it was collected. We were a part of that. And I think that's where the merger happens between community science, right? It's not just someone coming and doing it for you, but with ours, Maddie and Chris actually work with students. So they put in the time, man. They were helping them do tape scripts. They was teaching them how to connect to learn what's on those tape scripts. That is something that I have not seen before. And I have worked with other universities. And I also, with other different centers and universities and things like that, it didn't go like that. And so I think that's the part that's missing. When you're working with communities, it is different. You have to come in a spirit of working with the community so they can explain what it is that we done when we are advocating in these different offices that you may not be a part of that. And so I think just transparency and where that data lies is very important, so it's useful for communities.
We've heard so many amazing things here. I want to pause for a second to hear reflections, ideas from the audience, and maybe questions before I move on with any other questions. please. And introduce yourself if you don't mind.
It is Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna, yeah. I think we had the same issue, and I think like that's why at the land trust, well, I don't think, I keep saying that. I know at the land trust, one of the things that we were looking at was that intersection between it being unhealthy outside, and we knew that because we saw the pollution, we saw the facilities, but then also then acknowledging like it's also unhealthy in your home, right? So you can't run from it. And so when we were actually making looking at the housing and the type of housing we wanted to do, one of the things that we decided was passive housing, right? Which is a thing that's like, what's crazy is I think it's in some wealthier communities when it's really needed, in EJ communities and low income communities. But basically, it's like a certain housing is like, it's, look, I don't know it all, I ain't gonna lie to you. But the formulation of how the housing is sitting next to the sun and like all these other different things, it's able to like actually regulate its own heat, air, and all this other stuff, and keeping it in the housing. The way that we talk about it is like a coffee mug compared to a thermal cup or whatever, in the way that it's actually keeping clean air in. And then one of the other things, it's more expensive. It's way more expensive. But it also, it helps with air quality, but it also helps lower utility bills by sometimes up to 90%. So it's addressing kind of both of those concerns, but I'm not going to say it's alleviating like the fact that everything in your air is happening, but that's some of the housing that we're doing to address that direct concern of like unhealthy homes. But the problem for us is that like those houses cost a lot of money. And so like we're trying to get more and more subsidies to be able to keep doing that type of housing. But looking at also studying some of the things that was in the air, I know some of the students did like to see if coal was in the houses and things like that. They've done some of that to be able to collect that data. And so, yeah, I think it's more also besides the housing aspect that we're doing, and trying to address those needs. I also think it just needs to be more research. It also has to, I think also the problem is that we can't even get certain concerns addressed that's happening outside to even get them addressed to what's happening inside, right? We're still fighting the fight to acknowledge that what we can literally see on the outside is happening. And so I think it's just less research kind of for like what's happening in the homes, but we know it's there because people are getting sick. I don't know if you guys also.
I mean, I don't know specifically what you're concerned with testing for, but I know that folks from Dr. Heaney's team have done some indoor air quality work in gyms and stuff like that with modular QuantiQ monitors, QuantiQ modulaire monitors rather. I don't know what you're looking for to measure for specifically, but that may be worth connecting offline. Maybe connect you to some resources to see if there's affordable monitors that might be able to do the job.
I know we had problems in the high school, the middle school that you had gone to with mold. And I know there's like dust samples that you can do. Yeah, that might be something to look into. The one thing I wanted to address, you talked about like trust and the opportunity. So it just reminded me, like, it's beyond just the testing. So perfect example is what last week or 2 weeks ago, I emailed Chris because a reporter wanted to talk, member from Canada, about an issue there with biogas. And I thought Chris is great to have on the phone because we have some type of, preliminary that we can talk. Dr. Heaney has, I always tell him he has the initials after his name. So I can talk about community, but when you get to the scientific stuff, they want to see something with initials after your name. So I'm not the best person for that, Dr. Heaney is. But it goes beyond that. Like, they're not just there to get the data. They actually care about the issue and communities, and it goes beyond that. So that's what I said. Trust is so important.
Yeah, I'm Charles Lee, and I'm the Senior Policy Advisor. Well, I'm currently the Senior Policy Advisor for Environmental Justice at EPA. And I just wanted to, first of all, say that this conversation is really inspiring. So I really thank you for all this. But there's a lot of good things happening at EPA now that we've never seen, right? Mm-hmm. One of those is this thing called CIRCLE. CIRCLE is called the Community Engaged Collaborative for Research Collaborative for Learning and Excellence. And what that is that, so EPA has 10 laboratories around the country. One of them, EPA repurposed the entire laboratory to be about community engagement, community owned, and community driven research. Mm-hmm. So that's a really big deal. It is located in Edison, New Jersey. And so as you were talking, I'm thinking this. A lot of people at EPA have really good intentions, but this kind of work they don't know how to do. They have no idea how to go about it, right? So you guys have so much to teach in terms of what they do, right? And I think, so I have an invitation to you guys to set up a conversation with you and people that are, running that program so that you can start, so that they can make use of your expertise and experience. So it's something I just leave it out there, and we'll follow up if you're interested.
So I see head shaking.
Okay. Yeah, I think we like the invitation. But I think the invitation, if I can just flip it a little bit, of saying, come out, right? So come to these communities and see what they're actually dealing with and what that data is coming from, because you can't relate that data to experiences without actually seeing it and being a part of it. And so I think along with that invitation, what is EPA willing to actually do with this data? Is it actually going to be used to inform policies? Is it going to change policies, right? Because if it's not, then it's useless, right? And the fact that like it's just another thing that's collected. I can talk about a lot of data that's been collected that we all know of that is not changing anything right now. And so I think what we need from EPA is not just that willingness to say like you guys are doing it and we like that you guys got that knowledge, but to not only to address that the knowledge exists, but to actually do something with the knowledge, because it's just too much talking into like just a black space, right? We have to be willing to learn and then act. And so EPA need to be willing to learn and then act. And so I would challenge those two, that invitation to come with that spirit of action.
So we got a date.
But we can get to a date.
No, I would just, first of all, thank you very much, Charles, for the invitation. That is very, very kind of you. And, you know, I understand the arc bends ever so slowly towards justice, and, you know, we'll take it baby steps to get there. So, and thank you for all of your work pioneering this movement over the last many, 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 many years.
Onto that I think this two-part workshop, we were invited to give this at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences this February, right? We drove down for their program called Partnerships for Environmental Public Health, and that's a program that has been this bending the arc. You know, Liam O'Fallon and others have been carving out that space, but one thing that we heard was maybe a little bit similar to what you're saying, Charles, which is who needs to be in the room having this conversation. I think that's kind of what you were getting at, or not just in the room, but how do you effectively push this conversation forward in a way that allows those resources, those laboratories, those disciplinary experts to do that work that they know how to do, but in a way that could be transformational and seeking change. And so that's, I mean, honestly, when Dr. Wilson and I were PhD students, we were looking and having conversations every late night around whatever, Sports Center, whatever we were watching, sci-fi movies, which he loves, saying, how do we as students, and Steve loved this term, almost be guerrilla epidemiologists, guerrilla scientists, to recognize all of the skills and capacities and laboratories and measurement capabilities, but to be swimming in the stream so that nobody's objecting and we're getting, doing what we need to do, but we're kind of covertly, secretly activating them for a different way of producing knowledge. And so I wonder if there are movements within EPA that are opening that door to activate those capacities, activate those resources in a way that could really be transformative.
I think Maria was going to say something.
Observation around that. I love the comment you made about, that it's not just about getting the information but acting on it, and there's a lot of space in there, that's a hard, that's a big question.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of so that's part of the conversation, and you have to have it together. It's not like it's not enough to say you should just go and do this. It's got to figure it out together. Because I mean, quite frankly, what's happening in the Supreme Court. You know what's happening. All this stuff, right? So that's one thing. On the other side is this. For the typical EPA scientist to get into a space where they're really appreciating the kind of information that you provide, and take those disciplinary skills and really kind of refocus them, it's going to take a lot of work. It just isn't going to happen, and so I mean, I don't think it's any different than Chris and I were just talking about what's happening in Johns Hopkins in terms of a typical professor there, right? So you have to see that's what, you
Right.
know, so, we can all talk about this, right? I mean, it's, I think, really exciting that we're in this space that we can have this kind of conversation. You know, I can remember 5, 10 years ago where we're this kind of thing would be unheard of, right? So, you should all kind of applaud yourself for getting us this far.
We're just stubborn. We just persevere until, we're pushing.
See a hand up in the back? Oh, sorry.
Yep. Yes. Data. Yes. And I think that actually went into one of my response, and I do want to, you saw me snapping. I think that was my exact thing. It was just, we have data, and it's not only data that, let me tell you something. If data out there, community got access to it last. So we know everybody else seen it. We know all of the agencies saw it. I think the problem is when, I know we keep saying like, we know all of these, the wheels turn slow, right? Like we know, we keep hearing that. But the problem is we cannot make that okay, because this is our livelihoods, right? This is the difference between actually seeing that data translated to policies that's protecting us. This is our life. So it's not like, and I understand like even this talking about like the EPA scientists like coming, and then that's going to be a long journey to teaching them and doing this and saying that to them. But that's then when the agencies should say, maybe we should find somebody that's already taught. Maybe we should find somebody that already know how to engage communities. Maybe we should find somebody that know how to access that data and work with communities and then execute what needs to happen behind that data. Everything cannot fall on communities to then do, because we can't do it all. We already are now making ourselves, I'm not saying, we've been scientists, but now we got to do this type of data science, as been said. And now it's like, now we got to take the time to teach ourselves. We got to take the time to then learn how to then make a clear message of what that data means. And then we got to come back to the same agency and say the same things that we've been already living. And then at that point, the problem is that we say quantitative and quality data and all of this stuff is still data. It's still data. Community have been given data and testimonies, and I can collect that from decades ago. But that hasn't translated. And that's why we need translation. We need translation of this stuff to move faster, because we don't have a livelihood of waiting.
program coordinator, and I am a lead organizer with the DELCO, that's Delaware County Environmental Justice group, and we're fighting against incineration, hoping to get Philadelphia to stop its contract, sending trash of incineration to the incinerator in Chester, one of the largest incinerators, releasing agents into the air that cause things like cancer and respiratory issues and asthma, blah, blah, blah. And so we're working on that, but I'm also working with a group in Chester that is fighting against a crematorium that is less than 50 feet from somebody's house with 2 stacks. And they're burning more bodies than they should every day. So that's, okay, so that's me. I also hold 3 degrees, blah, blah. Okay, so I think it's really important to understand that the systems that have been in place that were born and created out of systemic racism are not going to immediately or even over time easily accept the truth of the stories of people that are not cared about in the first place.
Yep.
So we know this, but I don't think it is actually spoken out loud, right? We talk about it amongst ourselves, but we don't say it in rooms like this, right? When someone is not cared about, their story is invalidated.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how many times you tell it. If I don't care about you, then I don't care about your story.
Yep.
So when an organization begins to care about people, whether through pressure, which is how we got the slaves free, because Lincoln, it wasn't his art, it was pressure. Likewise, with various organizations across the country, we're starting to see the same thing, right? It's pressure. Now, with the pressure, there are people that actually have the heart that are somehow slipping into positions that are helping to mitigate, that are helping to produce change. So the sweet spot, I think we should understand this. The sweet spot is to connect with the people that have the heart, but also are up against the power that seek to continue the systemic racism that discounts you as a people.
Yeah.
So if if a person has a heart and a position, but they're in a system that still discredits me as a human being, they're gonna have a hell of a time trying to move anything. And so I believe this is a part of this conversation that must be understood. So in terms of understanding community as expert, every community is an expert, or should be, within its own situation, within its own setting. Perhaps part of the conversation needs to be in these organizations, whether it's EPA, EDF, whoever it is, the White House, I don't care. Perhaps part of the conversation, I'm not talking to you, basically. Perhaps part of the conversation needs to be hiring people, so changing the hiring guidelines.
Yep.
That if you want change, you actually hire the people
That can make it.
that actually have the information that is necessary, and then you qualify the information by respecting the people with them. So what I'm talking about is an exaltation of dignity and embrace of the truth that experiential knowledge is sometimes superior to exported or imported data. Because what data can always be is manipulated. But what experiential knowledge cannot be is altered.
Yeah.
Unlike what people in Florida are trying to do to Black history. So there's a very strong reality of an opportunity that exists here. So even though what the EPA still has to do takes a lot, I don't undermine or slap them in the face, because I'm seeing change happen. And it happens slowly. And if I think about it, relationships that are toxic that I've had in my life, if I wanted them better, it's taken years. It hasn't taken days or weeks or one conversation or 10. It's taken a very long time to get to a place where we trust each other. You know, I want you in my house again, I'll come to your house again. It's taken a long time for that. And so maybe understanding some of these elements is a part of what we need to embrace, right? Let me just highlight again. If I'm not validated as a human, you don't care about my story. So I don't care how much I scream and holler. If I'm not a person to you, you don't care about anything I'm saying. And it doesn't matter to you what I've been through when I'm not important. When I start to see that maybe you're listening now, I need to then lock in and then help you recognize that I'm more valuable than that. And because people now have a heart in position, understand how that works and get involved. Because not being a part of a system and screaming at it from the outside is not ever going to produce a change.
And I agree with what you said, but I think we need it all. I think we need data. I think we need the heart. We need, it's so like even within community, right? We need academia, right? We need folks on the ground that cares. We need journalists. We need it's a cycle. But what you were saying reminds me of the keynote we were hearing. Like, look at years ago what EPA was giving out for environmental justice. Look where it is today. So we have to recognize that we're all part of this journey, and it's not going to end overnight, but it needs to happen, right? Yeah. And we need it all.
And I think that's what I was saying also. It's just like, we can't keep starting from one. Like, if it's like this generation did this and then it dies with that generation and they was on step 200 and now we start a new generation, now we on step 1 again, there will never be progress. There will never be progress. And that's why I'm just saying, like, we can truly learn from what's already been done by valuing what's already been done. And then we should be on step 2000, right? Which is like, we've seen all this data. They already collected that in that generation. Now let's actually implement solutions in this one, right? It has to be a shift that happens. We cannot keep living in the same shift. Somebody said, you change gears for a reason. They said you can stay in park. You can go and drive and you can go forward, or you can go in reverse and you can go backwards. And I feel like we keep going backwards. We keep going backwards, and then we go to step 1 again and put it in park. It just has to, I just think we need that wheel to spin. It's not going slow to me. It's just not going. Because people are still dying. People are still living next to these same machineries. Policies are not addressing these different things. The policies and regulations are not getting stronger. There is no enforcement. That still ain't been happening since people been marching. So it's just a problem that this science that's so valued, you can't sell that to community that is so valued if it has not changed anything. And so that it's just a problem that I'm saying that has to move forward, and it's not on communities to move the ball every time, because it takes communities a long time to move that ball. It takes us a long time because we still got to work. We got to go to school. We got to take our kids to school. It take a long time for us to move that, but it's people that's in office. That's their job. That's where they spend most of their time. They should be moving that ball forward all the time. They should know the policies based on the data that they should already know. And then a lot of the chemicals and things that's toxic that's in the air right now, there is a threshold for them that is high. There is a threshold for them that is high. And so even when these companies are polluting and doing what they want to do, they go to the EPA and they're not technically polluting. They're within the bounds. We have to go back and do those bounds so we can actually protect communities and not corporations. That is the problem, and science needs to be addressing that. Science needs to be addressing that. There is no threshold for PM 2.5. There is none. Science have to make those type of leaps. And if it's not making those leaps, why is it of value to communities? That's what I'm saying. We have to move that ball forward. I know the wheel goes slow, but the wheel needs to speed up.
So, perfect time.
Oh, damn, I should have said
Go ahead, go.
No.
No, you should. You should do it.
Okay. I was just going to say, now that them balls are speeding forward, I think that one of the things that we have been doing in Curtis Bay, like I said, against the co-terminal, is that we have been able to actually stop a permit that was supposed to be given back a couple years ago. A few, not that long. I ain't about to. But we have been able to push that permit back for the code for their operations, and now that is coming to a hearing. That's happening in Curtis Bay on the October the 10th, where we are able to actually address what that a permit does not address as residents, to be able to say what we need in that permit for us. And this corporation, one of the things we did ask for was for enclosure of the facility that had an explosion. So, I mean, it makes sense. And that has dust getting outside of it, that we have already proven that. We have the data, everybody. We have the data. And now we just want to, this is now where we see that data play. And so we're hoping to invite everybody that's here to come. We're trying to set up virtually because I know some people don't live in Baltimore. But I think that is a time to then push data to policy.
Here's where everybody in the room can help, because that's,
That's the wheels turning, y'all.
right, exactly.
Mike Ewald, Energy Justice Network. To Noe's point about moving things faster, I appreciate that. And that's one of the things we've been doing at the local level. We've had about 8 victories so far in getting the standards reduced for how much industry is allowed to pollute done at either the local level, or in one case we got whole state law passed in terms of increasing and requiring continuous monitoring of toxic chemicals that EPA and most state permits just say, oh, you can monitor that once a year under the best conditions, and then you don't find out that they're speeding all these other days of the year, and you don't know because no one's got a radar gun on them, So it is possible to speed up the work. It's just we got to do it at a grassroots, bottom-up level and make our rules until it eventually becomes federal policy. But I've been working with BP on the crematory he had mentioned, this in Chester, and one of the things that you mentioned about, Maria, about the DNA testing in homes, a light bulb went off. I'm like, I wonder if this could be used for incomplete combustion from a crematory and finding people's remains in other people's homes. Because if anything's going to move the ball politically, that would probably be it. So I'm curious to know if that is doable, or if other, but even particulate from it can be detected. Because one of the things that, I know everyone's doing purple air monitors and stuff, right? But that picks up the same pollutant that you got from cars and home heating systems, so it's kind of useless in a lot of ways to get the same data that they can say it came from there or there or there, and it doesn't prove anything because it doesn't hold any specific company accountable, which is why I've been doing these local ordinances that put monitors, continuous ones, in smokestacks, not outside in the air. But if we can do outside air monitoring and it's stuff in homes that's for other pollutants that are more specific, like mercury from the crematory, maybe that would have more impact. It's just that that's a lot more expensive, and maybe Hopkins has it and I don't know that, and I need to understand what you can monitor. So my question is, how do we find out, what are all the things you can monitor and can help a community do? That's one of 3 questions I have for you. Another one is, it would help to understand, what's the charmed intake process? Because I work with a whole mess of communities, and there are probably a lot of things that you offer and a lot of things that are needs that I can line some of them up and help match make between institutions. And also, I know there's so many different things going on at Hopkins that I can't keep them all straight. So is there a guide to what does charm do? What does other offices in JHU do? So we can know who to go to for different things.
Those are really good questions. There's a forum. This isn't basically any way of bringing a concern in. If it's a phone conversation with any one of us, we can do an intake. But there's an online form on the website that can take in issues. It's outward facing, so you can submit a request there. But we also, through emails, through just any, like I said, phone conversation, anything, we can have that discussion. I think that the navigating what capacities exist to be able to get what tested is another thing that's the next step to figuring out, can we do things, and who can we line you up with to do things. And then I think the topic of this workshop is really relevant because I don't want to falsely just like put one entity on the up on the pedestal. I don't want to like just sit here and make it seem like I've been feeding Shoshanda and Marie and Mike $20 bills to say good things about me. But because I think a part of this is also just like, you know, honest recognition that even, as Charles is saying, even when good things are happening, there's still institutions that make it slower, harder to do what we want to do or to get where we want to go or to get the wheels to keep spinning. So that's also maybe a part of it that I think I was going to reflect on. It's about not just flagging like, you know, institutions as a monolith, but people within institutions, and that we hold each other accountable. So it's sort of a part of that, and maybe I'll put that out there as a discussion topic in addition to a way to answer your question. And then here we had another.
Okay, thank y'all. It's very much a pleasure to be here with y'all. But what I would like for to happen is not just the data from where y'all located at. Let's make this a worldwide data, starting with the nation's capital, and let it go to its far. EPA, whoever has the data, release it to the public. Because not everyone has the skill or the time to ask for a 4A over and over from these places that are doing these diggings and these chemicals in our living environment.
Mm-hmm.
There also has been and will continue to be by Dr. Chris Williams. Public Health and Liberation is what he started. He has a website. He will love all of this information. He will give his comments, and he will be as honest as he can be with what's going on, not just in the metropolitan area, but around the world, because our health has been ignored.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 64 years of age, and what I lived through in Northeast was a gas tank being in the ground that they never dug up until '89. I suffered. So everybody's aware of these lands where they had these gas tanks at. But they dug them up and threw some houses and some libraries and some more what they wanted to call REDC, gentrification, and move it on. So we're not even Chocolate City no more because the Johns Hopkins been passed. But God left me here to get in good trouble to speak out about what has been going on here in Washington, D.C. And we have suffered, but they knew it.
Mm-hmm.
They knew it, but what did they do about it? Nothing. From the homes we live in, number one, to us outside when we walk outside. I suffered mentally to know that people passed on a pandemic. What if what they passed on was still circling in the building I live in the community I live in?
Yeah.
God left me here from suffering a heart attack and didn't know I was having a heart attack to get into trouble. He could have took me on, but he was like, nah, I'm not finished with you yet. Speak up, tell them about it. Don't change your tone to satisfy them, because they will better understand where I'm coming from, because I'm not their people. I'm that people for the good trouble. And that's what I need to have y'all realize, that it ain't certain neighborhoods going through this stuff. We all are going through it. And the more databases released, and the more we stand up and get out there, if we hold a sign for an hour, that's going to open up some eyes. Because we have been ignored too long. Fighting to live and be treated equally. That's all we want. Thank you.
I was thinking, Shoshana, about the NDE data. You know how the
Oh, which one are you
what
talking
she's
about?
saying about just release the data.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Public
Boy, Yeah, I think that was a good point. I'm sorry, I was listening to everything and then I got lost because I was only thinking about what you said. I feel you. You know, I really do. I truly do. I think a lot of the times one of the things that we talked a lot about was just the word data. And what it is that we need to study that you supposedly don't know, and for us to know what it is that you supposedly don't know, you got to release what it is that you do know. And so I think we even with our report that we did, we actually had a connection with Maryland Department of Environment to say, like, first we yelled at them, we screamed at them, we told them what they were doing was wrong. We told them like there was 100-year history and they ignored it. And then we got to a place where we was like, all right, you ignored that, now is you gonna ignore this, right? And so then it was like, and then it turned into like, it was a relationship that had to be built. Like we all talked about trust and transparency and just acknowledging that. We had to acknowledge what we experienced and they had to acknowledge that they sat in the seats that could have stopped those experiences. But we were able to work with them around that report. So like they were actually one of the people that sponsored that report, that was a part of that report. They put their own monitors out along with ours to be able to also help gather data together. And so I think that was a sign of like just having that willingness to work together. And then they were even able to look at that type of data and say, all right, they put it on their website, like it's there, like you can see it. And then that permit process that's coming up, we are able to feed some of that report data to say like, this is why we need that, right? And like, we're not going to argue with them because they're part of the report. They know why we would say that. And so, yeah, I think some of that data just had to be released.
Ray Michael Bridgewater, President, CEO of the Cindy Pepper here in Washington, D.C. First and foremost, I'm at an age where I remember the Three Stooges, and there was this. They started singing this song, "She'd Be Coming Around the Mountain When She Comes," and Curly stopped Mo and said, "Those are the slowest 6 white horses I've ever seen." So I lead with that by saying this a couple of fundamental things. Because I was having a conversation when the youth were talking at lunch, and we both recognized that this is the last day of the conference, and the youth are talking. Fundamentally, of building these type of conferences, this conversation should take place on the first day, when all the funders and professors and universities and hospitals, because hospitals and universities and health departments can never lead projects like this. Never, ever. And that's what takes a lot of time. What takes a lot of time is the bureaucracy of going back to the same people and asking them for the same data that they already have. Mm-hmm. Okay? So it's fundamentally wrong for hospitals, universities, and health departments, in this case, to lead community projects. The community must lead. My background is actually theater, and not acting, but directing. So I understand the aspect of how to work with an actor to understand the role they're playing. Okay, that's what the hospitals, the universities, and the health department should be doing. They should be building them up and giving them the capacity to make a change in their community. So all of this is fundamentally wrong. I was glad that you were able to flip the script. Nothing personal against the gentleman here, but they have to be there on the ground where you are. That's why the hospitals, the universities, and the health department cannot lead, because they will always be gathering data. And they'll ask you for more data, and more, and more. How much data do you need to have to make a change? That's why those horses coming around the mountain is so slow. because you're sitting there waiting for and this is a song. You're sitting there waiting for the horses to come around. That's what the song is about. The song is about coming around the mountain when they come. When they come. Okay?
Now let's
When
get
they come. So we're always waiting for when they come. So there'll never be enough data to start the action of the horses coming around the mountain when they come. We'll be waiting here forever for the horses to make it down the mountain top. Okay, so it's very important. And I'm just saying that to reinforce what was said, because we work with the reentry population. We brought in the first prenatal mobile unit in this region. That has never it has never been done. Our health department never funded the mobile unit. We went out as a community. We built the organization. We took over the project. We went to certain funders and said, "This is what we need," and that's where you come in. When I say you take the lead, you have to take the lead. You should be the PIs. And the project should be built around where there is a community PI, because that's where it's all taking place. Finally, health literacy. Health literacy is so important. People need to understand that's what you're gathering data to do. Data should be not kept and owned, and that's a fundamental problem. Two, the community don't own the data. Data is oil. Okay, if you have the data, you can start making movement. Communities never own the data. The government owns the data, and once the community give it to them, you almost you have to pay to get it back. Okay, how fundamentally wrong is that? For a community to give up the data, turn over their sources and everything, and then have to pay $5 for the government to mail it back to them. Okay, it don't come free. They say we give it to you free, but you got give them $5 for them to put a sheet of paper in the mail and a stamp and send it back to you. So I'm addressing the whole structure of the conference. They should lead. They should be at the beginning of the conference while everybody is still here, including the government and the funders. It's very important for the funders to come to where you at, to see what's happening to you. Then they'll be able to fundamentally put their money where their mouth is at, because they know they're not paying staff, and it's important to pay the staff. No problem with that. But that the money actually get to where the need is at. Fundamentally, we still do not know how to deal with a vulnerable population. And that's across the board, across the racial board and the economic board. We don't know how to deal with the vulnerable population. But the way to do that is that they have to lead the project. You can't lead the project because they are the project. And then maybe one day when they become the project, those horses will finally come around that mountain and finally make it to where we were supposed to make it at. That's it.
That was very eloquent, more eloquent than I could be. Any closing thoughts? Because I think I see that we're probably here with the sessions ending, maybe our neighboring sessions. Anything that strikes anyone here?
Yeah, you guys start. You guys
Last thoughts, I would just like to thank everyone for coming out. This was really an engaging session. I love it. I love it. You all were great.
I think we went like real high and real low in this session. I just do want to take the time to acknowledge, like, look around and look how far that this movement has come. Unprecedented amount of resources on the table, unprecedented amount of community engaged science going on, unprecedented amounts of data coming forward. We finally do have some of those people with heart slipping into the positions where they need to be, where change continues to come ever so slowly. You make too radical of a decision, they're gonna throw you out, so you gotta do it in time, right? But look how far this has come from where it was half a century ago or 5 years ago. I mean, to be proud, because we can never be ignored again.
That was good. But I think I think this was a really good session. I think also just allowing community to lead. If you are going to be a part of a community or try to help that community, just understand that they are the experts in that conversation. They know what they're experiencing. They know how to even explain what their experiences, and they sometimes even know how to translate that to their own data. Don't go in with this mindset of, I'm going to teach them, but go in with the mindset that I'm going to learn from them. And just always go in with that mindset to learn. Like, I'm a part of the community, and I still learn from residents. You know what I'm saying? Like, I still learn what their experiences are. People are older than me. They have experienced this for a longer time. They can tell me about some of that history that I might not even been around for. So it's okay to always, as Ms. Mello always say to me, always be a lifetime learner, right? And I have hope that things will move. I'm just one of those people that's like, move it faster, we can do it. Like, we all moving the same rock, man. We should be able to move it a little faster. Thank y'all, though. Y'all was great. Yeah, I was ready to say, that. I was coming to you. I was coming over there. No, I'm just showing. Melanie,